Hello, this is Dale Matthews. Welcome to Inside News. And tonight we have Mike Jones and also Dan DeYoung, who is a candidate for commissioner here in Josephine County. Hello, Mike, and hello, Dan.
Good evening, Dale.
Hello. Well, Dan, what we're doing here lately is we're talking with the candidates who are up to be county commissioner, and we've already talked this week, as we did the last time with you. We've talked this week also with Lily Morgan and with Bill Hunker, and now's our chance to talk with you. And we're going to endeavor to ask the same general kinds of questions, although there's so many things that are happening, we could go in other directions, but I think that you'll find that these are more general. And, what would you do in this kind of circumstance to try to get an idea of the kind of commissioner you would be? Okay with you?
Yes, it is. I'll try to answer it to the best of my ability.
Okay. Now, we have some people who are pretty loyal viewers. They watch every show, and they've seen the videos. When Mike and I are talking about our opinions about something, those are just opinions. And I like to think that they're a bit more informed than most people, but we're trying to do something about that to raise up the level of knowledge that people have about what actually is happening, not just opinions about what's happening. And so one of the helpful things we think is to playback videotapes of the city Grants Pass City Council meeting. We just recently went to this marijuana town hall that took place in Williams, and we play back the tape. So there's no doubt that that thing actually happened. Now, our opinions about it are not what actually happened, but you can always go back to the videotape. Let's go to the videotape. So, as you're a county commissioner, there's two general ways to approach problem children. And one of them is to say, well, since I'm now a new county commissioner, everybody resets their record back to zero. I don't know anything about what they did in the past, and I don't care. And it's going to all start all over again with me, Dan DeYoung, as a county commissioner. Or you could look at the videotape and say, oh, that's not very good. Oh, that's a little bit of a problem. And they'd be a bit on a shorter leash of things that are okay to do and not okay to do, because it's like the fifth time they've done that and you didn't think it was right the first time. What's your general...
Dale, if you don't mind me interjecting, children is obviously a euphemism for something. What does that mean?
Problem
to you.
In my particular instance, I'm not talking about union employees, union governed employees. I'm only talking about at-will county managers. Thanks for pointing that out. Only at-will county managers or directors of different divisions within the county. That's my general question to you, Dan.
Okay. So what is your general question?
Oh, okay. The general question is...
I didn't find a question in that.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I was a little...
Do you feel that you can benefit from knowing something about their history, even though it's provable? I mean, you can see it. It's with your own eyes. You can tell this is what this person did in the past. Are they more likely to have 34 more chances, or are they more likely to have 2 more chances under a new commissioner, Dan DeYoung?
Well, first off, I would have to see probably the whole meeting to be able to put any statements in context. Sound bites are pretty, easy to extract. I've said things, when you listen to some of the things I said, you go, gee, did he actually say that? But it may have been in response to something farther upstream. So, if you have the whole thing and you say, this is the subject at hand and this is the meeting I was attending and this is what was said, then sure, that's, as if they said it, then they should just fess up to it. But to say, well, I've got a whole list of sound bites here and that's what I want you to judge this department head or whatever, judge that according to what he says in these different sound bites, I don't think I would go there. I'm going to give everybody a chance. I know, but you're right. If you've got a problem child, and you step into a classroom, I'm sure that school teachers pass along from year to year that little Johnny, you don't ask little Johnny questions because he's going to give you an answer. There's jokes about that, of course. But, I would like to see that everybody has their own merit. And then I've also noticed that employees, and I've had a number of employees, I've taken employees that weren't very good employees for other companies, and when they come to work for me, because we have a different managing style, that they'll work. Some people will work well for certain people and won't work well for other people for one reason or another. So, I think everybody, including, and it's a two-way street also. As you change county commissioners, your employees, you've got a certain obligation to the employee to, set the record straight also, because, they may not agree with everything that the newly elected official has up his sleeve either. So it's, there for the first, I don't know exactly what the time frame would be, but there for a while, there's going to be an awful lot of, basically sounding each other out to see where everybody stands. Does that answer your question for you, Dale?
Yeah. Yes. There's no need.
I enjoy history. In other words, history. If history. But I have seen employees change. Like I said, I have seen employees that I talk to their previous employer. And go, oh man, that guy. Why did he do this? I said, no, I never saw that. I never saw that because he doesn't do that working for me.
I can prove
it. Now if it's theft or something of that sort, that's not even a consideration for me. I don't go there. So, okay.
Right. I'll try to give a couple of examples. Mike may have some too, where we don't necessarily need to point fingers at somebody we'll just mention it in general. Most of the viewers of the show are going to know exactly who I'm talking about, but we don't need to drag that person's name out and everything. Here's an example. There is a department head who you can see on the videotape is sitting through a meeting. And there's a whole section of that meeting, not watching the hour and a half, but there's a whole section of that meeting where there's certain conversation that's taking place. I'm being pretty general. Now, after this happened, then it was that section of the conversation was pretty embarrassing with the things that were said. Afterwards, that department head swore up and down that the conversation never took place at all. And I said, but we just watched the tape last night and you're sitting right there. We can see that you're sitting there and the conversation obviously did take place. Would you like something to refresh your memory? No. Well, I would think that since this person's swearing that it never took place and they were sitting right there. Another example is when Mike and I went into the courtroom when it was talking about when Mark Bartholomew was speaking, and I think that you may have been there, but I know that an elected person was there in the room, a couple of them, and afterwards both of them swore that Mark Bartholomew never said what he said. I've got a little problem with that, and I'm wondering whether the videotape, not of necessarily the entire court proceedings, but at least the section that we're talking about, whether and where you can see the people are there, whether or not that might have any effect on you.
Well, I think, if you've got it on tape, as far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't mind if you said, no, this actually happened and I have it on tape. I wouldn't feel any reservation about watching it. There are a lot of times, I sit in meetings and, somebody says something and I didn't catch it, because I'm busy reading some other, document that's right in front of me. But I think where you're talking about in the courtroom, there isn't any other documents to read, other than the little handout they give you. But, I wouldn't be afraid to listen to it again and respond to it. Not at all.
It just, the whole gist of this conversation with you this evening is centering around the idea that when a commissioner comes in and they're new, does everyone's past record reset to zero, or would you, as a commissioner, say, you know, I'm going to be kind of watching over this person, or even have a conversation with them and say, look, I know that this is something that you've done in the past, and we'll just have no more of that.
I think that's a fair assumption that you should, you know, one-on-ones are fantastic, especially when you first start out. You know, like I said, when I've had employees over the years, you know, you generally keep an eye on them for the first couple of weeks. We call it a, you know, kind of a trial period. And, you know, where you watch that person and you kind of watch how they respond. You know, in my business, it was how do you handle things that come up. You know, you see all the home improvement shows where they, a big surprise, they open up the wall and there's a pipe in the wall. Well, you know, how do you handle that? And that's exactly what I'm looking for is, okay, if something comes up, how are you going to handle it? We're all going to make mistakes. There's no doubt about that. We all make mistakes, but it's how they're handled. And, you know, for instance, you know, I've had it, you know, on estimates. They said, well, you didn't say that. And it's how I handled that going forward was whether I retained that customer or not. And so that's very important to me. And as a businessman, I think it's, you know, it's something that's done every day in business, and certainly not every day, but it's done quite often in business, is that mistakes are made and things were overlooked. And, gee, I didn't see that, but now what am I going to do? And I always surprises me on TV, oh, we didn't know there was going to be a pipe in that wall. And so now it's going to cost you, the homeowner, another $10,000. Well, a certain amount of responsibility on the contractor. That's why a contractor is hired, because of his expertise. And you know, elected officials, I think, you know, elected officials are vetted, and to a certain extent by the voter, and how they respond to, you know, because things are going to come up. And you're right, you know, if you have a question about, say for instance, in I think where you're alluding to is that there is a person that is now working for the company that I'm getting ready to go to work for, and I've been told to keep an eye on that person, or more than one person. Then guess what? They automatically, everybody goes on parole or on probation strictly because of the fact that I'm new and they're new. So we got to take a little while for the two entities to say, okay, I'm gonna sound you out to see what you think about this and what you think about that. As long as there isn't a bunch of testing going on saying, okay, I'm going to put this to you and see how you react. I think I'm okay with that. But I think what you're asking me is would I listen to, you know, if there's past evidence of misconduct or whatever, would I take that into consideration? Yeah, I would. I think it's part of the vetting process, going both ways, because certainly they're going to know everything I've said too, and the way I act.
Hey, Dan, you mentioned accountability to a customer that you're dealing with, and that if you don't deal with them properly, you may lose that customer. How do you see the difference in accountability as a business person to the accountability of an elected official to what essentially are it's not really your customers, but the position is somewhat the same. You are their servant.
Up to the way I think what you're trying to say, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the customer is then the public, because it's the customer that hires you. In other words, in my business, I was in air conditioning for years, and when I went out and gave a proposal, if the people liked my product, they liked me, and they liked the price was within their range, they would hire me to do the job. They become the customer, I become the provider. Mm-hmm. And in much the same sense, or not, because government's not supposed to make. There were 9 people that gave bids on whether or not they should be 4 years as county commissioners. 9 people. Now it's down to 2. So in other words, in my business, that customer has said, I'm down to picking one of 2 companies to put my system in, and I feel as though that the voter becomes the customer at that point in time. The citizen becomes the customer because they chose you to be the company that provides a service for them, or no service. Depends on what they want.
Yeah, but the only difference there, of course, is that there's a 4-year grace period before you meet with your accountability, as opposed to, if you're a contractor and you screw something up.
No, there's recall. There's been numerous elected officials that have been recalled. Numerous.
Yeah,
so there is a way to chop it off. If the public, the customer, if the customer finds that, it just like if I started a job as a private, in business, as a businessman, and I start the job, and all of a sudden, I send guys out there, and they say, "Whoa, hold it, your guys are messy. They're cussing on the job. That's all they do is smoke in my bathroom," and blah 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 blah. That customer can fire that contractor also, because you have to live up to what you said you were going to do. And I think it's very similar in elected officials and politics. The people hired you to do a job based on what you told them. And if that turns out to be wrong, then there is a process, and the process is a recall. And it's happened around here a lot, and it happens everywhere. We're not overly recall happy, but you know what? It definitely it's there. I mean, it's part of the process. Well, and if it works, if the guy's bad enough, or the girl's bad enough, or the lady's bad enough, guess what? They are going to be gone if it's the will of the people.
Then this leads to what? Yes, and this leads to one of the questions that's obviously part of everyone's campaign, which is, do you want to see business the way that it's been done, or do you feel there's any need at all for a change in county government? And obviously, there are a number of people who feel that there's a need for change. And so then the question comes down to, and I'll give you another example, if you will, comes down to, will business be done the same way? Here's the example. There is a department head who, and everybody knows that you've been a fan in the past of levies, higher levies, property tax levies. You've supported them in the past, and we have yet to see what's going to happen in the future. And this person works in one of the departments in the main building there, and was during work hours was telling people who would come up to the counter, oh, by the way, you need to vote for this levy, and if you don't, this office that does a lot of things for you may just disappear. In fact, this person was going out during work hours to other places and giving people lectures about how they really needed to vote for that levy because, once again, they could be in hot water, although that this department and its continuing existence had nothing to do with the levy at all. Now, this person was given, not immediately, but given a big raise rather than shown the door. The question then would be, would we expect that kind of not just tolerance, but actually promotion of somebody like that would continue in a Dan DeYoung administration?
Well, let's go way back. Okay, I'm not going to go way back, but let's go back to the beginning statement that I backed levies and that I'm pro-levy, that I'm pro-tax, I'm pro. That's the your lead into that.
Right.
And what I am is I'm pro a solution. And if there's another solution coming down the tube, I'm willing to look at any solution. Taxes is one solution. If it doesn't fly through by the public, and that's one good thing about taxes, is it has to go to the people. If the people turn it down, it is a solution. I'm going to bring a solution. But to sit in office and say there is no solution other than taxes, I can't abide by that. I think there's all kinds of solutions, and I don't think we're going to get it all done with one sweep of the sword. We're gonna lop the head off this dragon. I'm sorry, but there's got to be a solution out there. And 58 cents as a property tax and bumping it up a little bit, that is a solution. But if it doesn't pass the voter, then it's off the table for right now. It's off the table.
Okay, so
you know me, I have asked for other solutions, and so far, I from the people, I want a solution. I want this thing to be fixed. And then there are those that say we don't have a problem, that there isn't a problem. But going back to it, there are ethics laws and things of that sort, and you know how campaign laws are and so on and so forth. There's rules and regulations and rules of the road that need to be followed by all employees. And if they broke the rules, then yes, there's a real problem there. and like you're saying, but I think who was it over on in the city side? I think it was Laurel Sampson and a couple other city officials that were basically using, I don't know if it was city resources in order to pass a public safety levy, and they got in hot water and were fined.
Well, but this person got a raise. Got a raise and a big pat on the back.
Hey, Dan, you mentioned that, 58 cents, and if you bump that up a little bit, that's a solution. How much of a raise in that is a solution? Because, we have proposed, or other people have proposed, things that are, we call them solutions, but again, you said you can't, you're not going to devour this dragon in one bite. You have to take a bunch of little things. The proposal of moving road dollars over to the sheriff, they say that's not a solution. That's a bridge to nowhere. Well, clearly, if you took $1 million and you put it over in the sheriff's department for the purpose of, augmenting their ability to patrol the county, that is a benefit to them. And then if you took, some economic development money and threw that over there and then looked for other ways of getting other money in there, those two could possibly be solutions. It seems to me that the word solution in many cases is code for levy. And if you don't pass a levy, then it's not a solution. You can't call it a solution. I'm not going to put words in your mouth, and I certainly don't want you to put words in my mouth. But here's another solution. Okay, the city, when the city purchases 30 jail beds, it's at a cost of roughly $1 million. It's $972,000. Okay, right.
And so we establish a price on what 30 jail beds does. At the end of the day, even after the city purchases their 30 jail beds, there's 120 jail beds left open over there at the jail.
Right.
Now we've got right to the neighbor to the east of us, which is Medford and Jackson County. Jackson County jail is clear full, at capacity 250. So they're having to turn people loose. Have we gone to the Jackson County commissioners and Jackson County sheriff and said, if you would like, we will rent you 30 beds, 30 miles away for $1 million. So you don't have to go build a new jail or anything, or until you do need to build a jail. We have potentially $4 million worth of rooms for rent over in Josephine County.
Hello.
Our jail, wouldn't it? One of the big things.
Absolutely. Listen.
The jail. We're going to have to close the jail unless we can get some more money. Well, there's $4 million that I think is and the same thing with the state. The state's overcrowded in their prison system. Have we approached the state? We had some beds for rent down here. The Curry County should do the same thing. Their jail isn't very big, but ours is. Ours is a pretty new facility, state of the art.
That's right.
It doesn't need to be upgraded or anything. So there is part of a solution, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you know what? I'll tell you, Dan, this is not the first time it's been proposed, but it's never been done. And I don't know, if they have had conversations with Jackson County and they just didn't reciprocate positively, or what took place there. But
I don't know
no
either.
one is.
I don't know either. So I can't.
Yeah, no one is moving on that. But $4 million. That's
and when you get to the road tax, when you take road dollars, you take road maintenance dollars and say, okay, we're going to shift them over. We're going to take $1 million. We're going to throw it. We're going to give it to the sheriff's department. Take it out of public works and give it to the sheriff's department. In the public works department has a reserve, I think is what they call it. It's kind of a contingency fund or whatever. And there was about $2.5 million in that. Curry County over there, our neighbor to the west, they had close to, I believe it was either 20 or $30 million in their road fund. And they said, oh yeah, well, we can do it. Well, unfortunately they did not rob it, because when they had that big sinkhole in there, it's going to take every bit of that to fix that. We don't have.
I believe that sinkhole was on the
here in Josephine County, and in road dollars, you can hear. You know, I'm the liaison to the Rogue Valley Area Commission on Transportation. I just got back from the Super Act on Region 3. And so, you know, transportation dollars that's pretty strict as to what you're going to use them for. Now, I realize, and you make
that's the exact same.
Dollars could certainly be taken out of there, but you do that every year. I don't know whether that would be wise to do that.
Dan, that's the exact same talking points.
Reserve is very small.
Dan, that's the exact same talking points we get out of the commissioners on this, and I realize what their agenda is. And if you, I'm sorry.
What is their agenda?
Their agenda is don't alleviate anything with the sheriff.
You know that's exactly what the commissioners say, and I know what their agenda is. So, what do you, in your perception? What is your perception of their agenda to lead to $2.5 million in a reserve?
Okay, pause for a moment, and I will tell you, they don't want to alleviate the problem at all. Any alleviation of the problem will take pressure off a levy, and they're not interested in that in any way, shape, or form. A levy is the only solution that they're interested in.
Okay, so
that's pretty obvious.
I see where you're going with it. Yeah, okay.
And also, Dan, taking money from the roads fund for road patrols, which is allowed by the state legislature. In fact, they had us in mind, us and a couple other counties in mind when they said that, to describe that as robbing those funds is
especially the windfall.
Yeah. It says it comes out, the way everybody feels comes out in the words that they use, and to say that it's an emergency and the police and the sheriff's department needs this money and here's one partial solution to it is one way of putting it, and the other is to say that you're robbing from Peter to pay Paul, and it wasn't worth giving him the money the last time we gave him the money. It was a waste.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting also to note that it was $1 million windfall. They expected $56,000, and $1 million came in, and we're in the midst of air quoting here a public safety fiscal emergency. Now that to me is kind of like fear salesmanship. And they want a certain outcome to that, but they're not interested. The situation, it seems as though they wanted the appearance of an emergency, but not the actuality of an emergency, because in an actual emergency, there are certain things that you do that they certainly weren't doing and still aren't doing. But anyway,
we're going to give you a chance to weigh in because this is your time here. But I would also add to what Mike says.
I'm enjoying listening to you.
Well, I would also add to what Mike says and it's funny, kind of an emergency. And at the beginning of every meeting, during an emergency, during a real emergency, shouldn't every meeting start with the current state of the emergency is this? Well, they don't. So please talk to us a little bit about this, Dan.
That makes sense. I would say if we have I would say that we need to pay a lot more attention and bring it up at more meetings. That this is where we stand on quote unquote the emergency. But didn't when they said, okay, we're gonna declare an emergency and we're gonna go to the governor, didn't they back off from that and say, well, no, we're not. It's not to that point yet. What was going on with that?
Mike knows.
If it is a self-proclaimed emergency, I would have thought they'd have jumped at any chance to help from a life ring from any boat.
Right. Well, I think that they were a little bit moved by, Carl Wilson's opinion on it. He said, listen, I'm a businessman. So when somebody puts a contract in front of me, I read it and I read this contract and I go, hell no, I think that maybe they were moved by that. And I'm surprised and a little bit discouraged that they didn't already have that opinion from having read the contract themselves and understanding that there's all kinds of unspoken things in there that we're then going to have to deal with down the road with the state's fingers in our pie.
It was stuff that was going to have to be surrendered that I doubt it would be really difficult to get it back. Your sovereignty is one of them.
Yep.
But here, and you mentioned it, so I'm going to mention it also. Is Carl Wilson's a businessman? So am I. That's one of the things that I really think is important. Is that I think that it needs to be a person that's been in business for a long period of time. I was a successful businessman, successful to a level. I never did become a Bill Gates or anybody like that, but I've lived a very comfortable life, and I've worked hard for that. I've been a businessman, and I've made my mistakes. I've corrected my mistakes to the best of my ability, and some of them I win, some of them I lose. Am I right all the time on my decision making? Absolutely not. None of us is. But I'm also, because I've been in business, I've also had to be a good listener, both to customers and employees. I sign the front of a paycheck and I sign the back of a paycheck. Carl Wilson does the exact same thing, and he's a successful businessman. For KLDR, darn well they've done really well for themselves. So there's where we're at. I just think that that a businessman, a business person's vision and perspective on government is really, really needed. Okay, so that's where and we can give case examples of how would you handle that. But you know what? When you're in business, you've got to work on the fly, and you have to go back out to your truck, step back, take a step back, and say, now what is going to be the best decision to move this machine forward and not backward.
I'm glad you brought that up because
if I keep bringing stuff up from the past, because I can bring up, my wife is very good about this. She tends to look forward instead of backward, and that's why I've been married for 46 years, because she certainly bring up an awful lot of things that I've done over the years that I'm not real proud of, and she just tends to put those off in a locker, closes the padlock, and says, "Honey, I love you."
Oh yeah.
We're off and running.
Yes, okay. Been married for 25 years. I know exactly what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about, Mike. I've been married for 46 years.
Yes, I do.
47, and you know what? I wouldn't trade a dime of it. But she's had to have a lot of patience, and certainly if she was videoing, as we do now with technology that we have now, she could have. There's any time that if I start to say something, she could say, "I want you to watch this."
Yes.
Yeah.
You could do it. Thank God she does it, gentlemen. Thank God.
Yeah. I hear you there.
One of the things that you had said earlier really struck me, and you also have a person that's been elected. That'd be Wally Hicks. He's an elected legal counsel. And there's nothing you can do about an elected legal counsel except either take his advice or don't take his advice. There's nothing anybody can do about that, at least for a couple of years. And one of the challenges with Wally Hicks is that he's given advice to the commissioners. For example, he was involved when this lady, when this person was doing some of these things that were unethical. He was sitting right in those same meetings with the commissioners when they got in trouble with the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, and now the OGEC is looking at Wally Hicks. He's been involved in a number of things where I would think that since he's defined his own job as protecting the commissioners and keeping the county out of trouble, that he's not done a really good job in some really key places. How much can you, given the record of how things have gone, how much can you trust that guy to give you good advice?
Well, yes, if this is up to the Ethics Commission, I think you have to wait to see what their findings are, don't you?
I know what their findings are going to be.
Accusing, and here again, I've been accused of things, and in fact, I'll give you an example. In our industry, it's the Construction Contractors Board. And that is that's the governing, not the governing, but it is the legal body of the construction industry. We all belong. We all hold CCB licenses, and they're at the state level. And if somebody files a complaint against me, that doesn't mean that I did anything wrong. That means that person's perception of what I did was that I did something wrong. We go the distance. We go the entire process. And the Ethics Commission, I'm sure, has a process that they have to go through. And the same thing with the CCB. And I was brought up 3 times. People say, "Oh, have you ever been turned into the CCB?" Yes, I have, 3 times. But I won all 3 of them because you know why? I was right.
Yeah, but
all 3 times.
Dan,
we need to let these things take their course, and then you act accordingly.
This is
an elected official. If Wally Hicks is doing something wrong, and he can certainly be recalled because he's elected. Correct.
Well, here's the problem. First of all, who would run against this guy? It took 20 years to have anybody run against the previous person. And the first time somebody ran against that guy, he lost. But here's the point is a little bit different than that. There's 4 people in the room. 3 of them are commissioners who've been found by the OGC to be guilty of doing wrong things during that meeting. The last person was sitting in the room is legal counsel, who they say was giving him advice about what's okay to do and not okay. The OGEC is going to send him a letter advising him what the rules are, which we all know, which the commissioners say that they know, which he said that he knows. So they're just going to give him a letter of advice. That's going to be the verdict. That's all that's going to happen. The question is, if they got in trouble for sitting in a meeting with him, then how much can you trust him to give you good advice during a meeting?
And I'd have to go back through and see everything involved with that particular meeting. Okay, I really would. We're using some real generalities here, and who knows? If I was a commissioner, I might be sitting in the exact same meeting and make the exact same mistake. But that's why we have rules and we have process. So I'm not perfect. I don't ever claim to be perfect. I'm going to make my flaws just like everybody else. But I also think that there's a process to figure out exactly what you did wrong, and go from there. So we get into these case by case, and to be quite honest with you, I am not going to pass a verdict without seeing the whole thing. So does that make any sense? I can't sit here and say, yeah, Dale, you're right. Yeah, Mike, well, I was there, because I wasn't. There have been times that I've abstained from
I was
at the city level strictly because I haven't heard all the testimony. And I'll say the same thing here. I haven't seen the whole thing, so we're giving generalities. Well, he said, she said, and I can't work that way. And I'm certainly not running on that. I'm not going to run on that as a campaign issue. But I plan to be fair. I plan to be fair and listen to everybody, because that's part of the job of being an employer.
Well, that's what this show was about, is given the evidence, what would you do?
The opportunity, so.
Mike?
Listen, I wasn't really expecting to hear, a litany of suspects paraded before Dan DeYoung, and hear, what judgment you're going to pass on each one of them. I mean, that's a little bit of a reach to expect that. You can lay out a hypothetical scenario, but nobody's been convicted of anything here. So,
wait a second.
And listen, he has to work. If he gets in there, he has to work with these people.
That's different.
You can't.
Mike, but the commissioners have been found guilty. I've also put this question to the other 2 candidates, and the question is, since they have been found guilty, and since the legal counsel was sitting right in there with them, does he bear any responsibility? And if he bears no responsibility, fine, but the evidence shows that they were found guilty. What more does one need to know if you also know that he was there with them, and they say that he was there with them?
Well, if you're
they're so guilty or not guilty.
The attorney actually knew that, and I won't even use O.J. Simpson as an example. So if O.J. Simpson were found guilty, does Johnny Cochran go serve jail time with him because he was trying to get him off?
Only if Johnny Cochran was standing next to O.J. when he did the crime.
When he did it. Well, that's good.
And that's what happened here.
I got to answer that, yeah.
Yeah, and Mike knows because we've seen the OGEC, we've listened to the OGEC response. A guy comes forward and that same day that they were found guilty, and he says, "Hey, what do you think I was supposed to do?" And they said to him, "You were supposed to get up and leave the room because they're disobeying the law." And that guy isn't even a lawyer. That's the reason for the question. Not to rake everybody over the coal, but to say, once you realize, once you see in black and white what the state has said about these fellows and who was involved in it, and they're basically blaming him, then the question, and I'm not asking it anymore, okay? But then the question was, how much can you trust that guy to give you good advice to keep you out of trouble when it didn't work? It worked disastrously for the commissioners. That's the reason I asked.
Okay. Well, and that's here we go. We're right back to we're going back to trust again. And,
yes.
We all have to do, you got to trust as many people as you can. I have, like I said, I've given bad advice to people, but you know what? I go, gee, you ask my advice, I'm going to give it to you. Whether you take it or not is different. So, yeah. Okay. We'll get off of that one. So I think we can.
Hey, listen, Dan, I'm glad you brought up the word trust because trust, sure. Everybody mentions that is what the issue is. That's why we won't pass a levy. We won't give these people more money because we don't trust them. So how do you address that? How do you bring us back to trust?
I agree. I think trust is the number one thing, and I don't know if that can be fixed in a short period of time. That's a long haul thing. Especially given the track record and the fact that the lack of trust up until now, it's going to take an awful lot of fence bending to keep the cows in now.
That's correct.
That's for sure.
Yes, but you have to identify what it is that.
And it's not going to be that. Oh, Dan DeYoung's going to come in there, and I trust him, so therefore, that is not.
That's not going to work.
Yeah,
well,
kids is earned. Yeah. Respect is earned, and that takes time. Mm-hmm. So in the meantime. For instance, what I would like to see is that I know that just the fact that say, I'm a different than the last guy. Well, that doesn't mean anything to the normal people that have lost trust in government all the way around. Right. And that's from the bottom to the top. That's from the bottom to the top. They don't trust the guy reading the water meter, for Pete's sake, and he's a private contractor. So the trust is out the window a long time ago, and it's going to take a long time to get it back. But in the meantime, I think what needs to happen is that, for instance, if you don't trust the county commissioners, then why don't you send somebody from, say, Cave Junction or from Williams or from Sunny Valley or from Wolf Creek? Send somebody that you do trust. There's somebody that goes to the Grange meetings. There's somebody that goes to the fire hall meetings in Wolf Creek. There's some person in that vicinity, in that little district or area that you do trust. Send them to town with your message and let them take back the message of what he just saw with his own two eyes. He says, I saw them open up that checkbook and write a check for the power bill for the courthouse for $1,168 last month. I saw that. And take their message to town and take the message from the commissioners back out. And if there's no message from the commissioners, which in my estimation, I had a person ask me in Wolf Creek the other day, he said, so what are you going to do for me? I said, nothing. I said, nothing? I said, I'm not going to tell you how to live. I said, people in Wolf Creek live in Wolf Creek because they like to have people live in Wolf Creek. I'm not going to go out there and shove my lifestyle down their throat. That's not going to happen.
One of the things,
but yet if they need help out there on something, I want them to feel comfortable enough coming to me, calling me, and I go out there and visit with them and see what their needs are. Then I feel I want them to be comfortable enough to call me. If they're not comfortable enough to call me, then they should have a representative in their area that says, you know what, I can go talk to those folks, and I'll be back in a couple of days. And I think that's very important. So trust is something. I agree with you 100%, Mike and Dale. Trust has gone a long ways away in government, whether it be city, county, state, federal. Anything. It does not matter. You don't trust the IRS. You don't trust the EPA. You don't trust BLM. There's been so many things that with good reason, there's no trust. So to that end, we'll work on that. Will I be successful in 4 years at bringing back trust into government? No, absolutely not. I'm certainly not going to, it's not going to be for the lack of trying. But at the same time, it doesn't matter what I say. Some people say, oh, I trust him to do what I think is going to be right. And other people, he didn't do what I want, so I don't trust him. So you're never going to get 100, you're never going to bat 1,000 on that. But we're going to work on it. It's something you just can't throw your arms up and say,
that's true.
I give up. You know, because we've got some people that have just thrown up their arms and said, I give up. I can't please them, so guess what? I'm just not going to do anything. And that's not, you know, there's tough decisions to be made in any kind of government when you're an elected official. There are tough decisions, and a lot of times it's not it's not some people lose and some people win. So that's a tough one. But you've got to have somebody that says, I'm going to listen to everybody, and I'm not always going to do what you want me to do. But you know what? I'm going to certainly be a listener. I'm going to listen to you. I like to talk too, So
that's a good thing on this show.
It is a talk show, isn't it?
Yes, that's what it is. One of the things that Nate Gowryrand says, and I like this guy, he's in community corrections. One of the things he says is that when they're watching over people who are on probation, and I think in general, the county commissioners are on probation for sure, as far as public confidence goes. One of the things he watches for is who is it that once they're out of jail, once they go back into society, who are they hanging with? Whose advice are they now taking? Who is forming their universe? Is it the same people that got in trouble before and just haven't been caught or haven't been sent packing? And that's the whole theme to me of this show today is, of course, you need to be fair and you need to see it with your own eyes, but are you going to continue to hang around the people who have gotten us into this fix in the beginning? And maybe better than a lot of other people, that staff, the continuing influence of the staff can get everybody into a bunch of trouble.
Yes, to a certain point. Yes, I think that from the staff standpoint, I like to see staff and government work together. But there are certain decisions that are made that absolutely, like I said, the controversy over the water treatment plant. They just want to spend money. That's all they want is money. But, at some point in time, I have to take a step back and say, is this my own well? Am I making a decision that my well isn't really good and the water's not as good as it should be? But you know what? I can fix that well or dig it a little deeper, or I can go over here, move over 100 yards and dig a new well and put in a new pump to supply my family with water. Or can I just get by for 60% or 40% of the cost of a new well and work with this old one because I know I can do that? Well, that's all well and good. It's on the home front. But one of the things that City Council is saddled with is an 80-year-old water plant sitting right on the edge of the cliff overlooking the river. But the main thing is that it doesn't just supply one person. It supplies 35,000 people with water and fire protection water, not just drinking water and water for your lawns and wash your car. That's a big, big, big responsibility on the city. And yes, does it cost money to replace it? Sure. But you know what? I think we need to vet that very, very carefully and realize what we're playing with here. And the enormity of what we're playing with here. It's not my own personal well. It's the well for 35,000 people. And same thing with the sewage treatment plant. It's at maximum. And guess what? You just don't say, well, I just choose not to put another tank in there. I'm just going to dump the stuff in the river. No, you're not. And the city is keeping Dan. You have to basically, when I hear what they say, I have to believe them that we're at capacity. And all indicators show that we're at capacity on the sewer side. So we need to do something about that. So, but that's just when you get into the government, I like to see staff and elected officials work very hand in hand together. But there's some trust there, isn't there?
Yep.
You have to be able to trust. So here again, I had my employees. My employees trusted me to do the right decision for the company, which then ends up in their pocket. And that's exactly what it is. I trust my employees when they go out and they say, I didn't do that, boss. I trust them until I'm proven otherwise. So
hey, Dale,
therein lies the problem. And it's a problem everywhere. It's not just in government. It's not just in Grants Pass and Josephine County. It's on the state level. It's an ODOT. So
speaking of infrastructure, Dale,
collectively, and maybe depending on who gets in there and how they act and what they do, wouldn't it be nice? And I just hate to say this, but wouldn't it be nice to be able to change your format from badcounty.gov to not so bad county or getting better county.gov?
It would be
I think
good.
that'd be fantastic.
Well, Mike, you were going to say something.
Yes, I was going to say something. Number one, Dale, we need to invest somehow in the infrastructure of our phone system, because it doesn't allow the person who is talking on the other end to hear the other people speaking, and that's problematic. And the cadence of Dan's speech is very much, it comes to an end and then it starts right back up again and keeps going.
That's true.
Okay. Here's the thing.
You put that real I like that. Thank you.
Here's the interesting thing, though, that I think is important, is that staff is completely insulated from the economic or social impact of the decisions that they make. And I am bothered by staff that puts forth things that gets rubber stamped by either the city council or the board of commissioners without having experienced people on there who are taking full charge of that stuff. You can't trust the staff. I'm not saying they're not trustworthy people. I'm saying don't trust the staff to do it. You need to have elected officials, people that are put in situations of accountability so that they can then be held accountable later for their actions, and they take them seriously. People who do not have to account for their decisions can make irresponsible decisions without feeling the impact of those situation. It doesn't impact them at all. They don't get fired. They don't get a cut in pay. Nothing happens to them.
That's the whole purpose of tonight's show. The whole purpose. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I agree with what you just said. I believe that there should be accountability in everything. But here again, it relies on what is the past experience of the person that's put into office. Are they a business person where they have to be held accountable for everything they do day in and day out? A business owner that is accountable because, guess what? It's his livelihood, but it also means the livelihood of everybody that works for him. When he makes a bad decision, it could end the livelihood of everybody that's in his employment. And so, those are things that are important. And I agree with you. I think, there's been a lot of things on the city side. The city council has said, whoa, hold it, stop right there. That isn't going to happen. There's been some real boondoggles. I agree with that. There's been a lot of things you saw. Again, we can all go back to the bus stop thing. We can go back to River Road Reserve. There's a lot of bad decisions that were made, and the council did not stop. But there's been a lot of stuff in the recent years that the council did stop, and that's what it's all about. And the same thing. When you get to the commissioner side, if they see something going wrong and they talk it over, they go, nope, that's it. That's just not going to happen because that isn't a smart business move to make.
Well, speaking of stopping,
I'm on board with that.
Speaking of stopping, at some point, like it or not, we have to stop this show. And it's been
you
just
have to stop the cart and everybody get out of the wagon.
Eventually, yes, and it's been just about 45 minutes. And I always try to assure Mike, much to my chagrin, and rarely happens, that I'm going to try to keep my eye on the clock and see that this is possible. Now, next week, you were delayed by a few days. Next week, we're going to have the other two commissioner candidates on, and I realize it's only a week away, but we'll talk to you off air about whether it'd be possible to get you back in sync with the others. And so we're going to have you back on, and hopefully you feel that the questions that we're asking are pretty much the same kinds of questions a lot of people are asking, and you will look kindly upon such a thing, sir.
Yes, that's fair. I've got a meeting to go to in about 5 minutes, so I have to close this off myself. So that'll give you time to give your credits going and go from there, okay?
Yeah, our credits are going to go. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thanks, Dan.
You bet. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So, Mike, you want to
Yes.
handle the credits?
The credits, yes. This television program was almost completely and solely produced by Dale Matthews of
Oh,
Grant
gee.
Pass.
Yeah, but that's not always a good thing because of the way that I do it. I'm trying to do it right, like the other
Yeah,
night, with all that black in between.
Well, you know what? That is interesting about his voice is like that. You know, you go, okay, nope, he's done, and you start to come back in, and then he's started up again. And the characteristic, we're using an IP method of bringing in the caller, and it's very, very difficult because there's a cancellation that's taking place there as that person is talking to you. There's a noise cancellation that cancels anything coming back to them, so they can't really hear except in between if there's a long enough pause. It's very, very challenging sometimes.
It's bad for us too because it makes it look like we're trying to interrupt what he's saying,
Right.
and all we're going to do is get a word in edgewise. Good for Dan that he's a Type A personality and can handle this show completely by himself without any problems.
We should just hand him a set of questions and have him answer it. Although, you know what, this is a good back and forth. I still think that there needs to be greater definition as to, listen, I mean, if you're going to deal with the trust issue, you have to identify what it is that has caused people to mistrust government. Or distrust.
That was supposed to be my point. I was trying to get to that point. If there were people who, I mean, because we don't know what this guy's going to do. I mean, we can look a bit of what he's done in the past, okay, and then you should expect more of the same, everybody. But he's running against Keith Heck, and you know what Keith Heck has done in the past. So now, what are you going to do? Okay, so he comes in. And you can't say, well, what are you going to do on a day-by-day? We don't know what he's going to do on a day-by-day basis. So all that we can do is say, given the record that we've seen, how much are you going to trust these people who are already there? And are you going to give them free reign, especially the staff people?
Dale's hoping for Dan out on the front lawn of the courthouse building a gallows to deal with this as he's coming in, and I mean that's a little come on.
Well, I think it's a good start with some of these characters, but I understand your point. The real question is, how short is the rope going to be? How short is the rope going to be? How many chances are you going to give them? And I think it's a legit question. When some people come in, they say, hey, new sheriff's in town, all gauges are reset back to zero. I'm going to believe what I see when I see it. And he even said, well, you guys edit the videotape. We've heard that lots of times. And because it's edited and it's not the full 1.5 hour meeting, it doesn't matter really that the entire segment took place during only that 5 minutes and there was nothing.
I don't know. Listen,
really?
You know what? If you believe that, you have to disbelieve every single soundbite or video chunk that you've ever seen, because those are generally not given with the full context of everything that took place leading up to it and trailing away from it. So,
and besides, if you're going to do that, what about the meetings that happened 3 weeks before that and 5 weeks after that, and everything is a continuum, and you can't believe any. Well,
listen, you know what? I think that it's reasonable to expect that somebody is going to be very deliberate about what they say about people that they're going to be working with. And by deliberate, I mean they're going to deliberate on it a little bit before they or they're going to pick their words wisely.
Especially about staff. You saw how quickly he jumped on that question about staff. He's still in the city council.
Right. Right. And he may have to deal with fire from them. But you know what? I don't like the idea, because if you are completely insulated from the impact of your actions, you can spray money out of a fire hose and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's no
more today than ever with the county commissioners, and than it used to be when someone would come up and make a report, a department head, not the employees. Okay, department head would come up and make a report. One could ask questions from the audience. Now, Mr. Brandis, isn't this true? We can no longer do that, and that's because of Simon Hare. We can no longer ask questions of department heads. Never again.
Yeah.
So,
well, you know what? One thing that I think that, because he mentioned, the guy comes down from Wolf Creek and observe what's going on and is able to tell people he knows that I witnessed such and such. You could make it so everybody witnesses everything, and all you got to do is have, an IP camera. I have a piece of software here that allows me to push a button and I can be broadcasting to YouTube in a hell of a lot better quality than what they're putting in the Ambassador. You can push a button and you mic everybody up and you have HD video coming out of that room whenever there's something in session. And when you stop broadcasting, boom, it makes a YouTube video. Somebody could neatly go in there and title it so that it's, has the appropriate titling to attribution to it, and then you have a full record of everything that's going on. That's what needs to happen. You need to have accountability, and that would also make Dale's job a heck of a lot easier too.
It would, and I was trying not to mention people's names. In fact, I don't think that I did, but everyone except for an elected legal counsel, Wally Hicks. But there's a fellow that works in IT, and his job as a department head is to make sure that the sound and the video from the weekly business session alone is excellent. And we've talked about the fact that if you goof that up once out in the private industry, twice, 3 times, 5 times, 10 times, you wouldn't work there anymore. Now, I know that Mike can do this because I've seen him do it. Okay. And so we know better than probably anybody in the county that this kind of thing can be done. We've actually done it. So then the question is, how many more chances do you give this guy that's in charge of IT? How many more chances do you give him to goof up the broadcast from the Ambassador Auditorium? I would say 0 more chances. That's what I would say. And I can only hope that some of these candidates will say, well, I'll give them 1 or I'll give them 2. Please don't give them 35 more chances to do the job correctly.
Well, you know what? I know because I'm privy to the equipment that they have in the back room there. Me
too. And I've operated it personally.
And that is high, and they've upgraded it since you were there.
That's right.
And the switching equipment that they have and the video production gear, just the software package and some of that gear costs about 25-30 grand.
Yes.
And I can do a better job with a much smaller investment than that. So
that is the story between you and me and government. That's the entire story. Right. You do a better job for less money,
right,
and better serving people.
And that is why I'm dubious of staff. And not having the proper oversight. And I don't believe that Simon Hare, who doesn't seem to have held much of a job before this came along, and Cheryl Walker, and I think just Keith Heck is beyond supervising anything. I think he's out to pasture. So it's very, very difficult for and they're not interested in overseeing those guys anyway. Anyway, we're way past 45 minutes now.
Well, we're way past 45 minutes now, and thank you for watching our show, and thank you for participating, Mike Jones, and we appreciate you, and we're going to have these folks on again, and we're going to try to ask them the same general kinds of questions on another topic and see what one could expect for voting for one person over another. That's our goal. And maybe we can actually give them a couple of ideas of things that they could do just a little bit differently than business as usual. It would be nice.